everyone, welcome to Swayam MOOC on British Poetry and Drama, 14th to 17th century. Today's session isn't a routine lecture. It's more like a conversation across centuries, a quiet meeting between us and those distant voices that once shaped the English imagination. You've already journeyed far, from the bold laughter of Chaucer's Wife of Bath to Sydney's tender lover in sonnet number 1. From Spenser's sweet warrior, so gentle yet resolute, to Dr. Foster's the scholar who dared to dream beyond the human bound. You have walked through the haunted corridors of Macbeth's conscience and danced among the joyful disguises of Twelfth Night. Each of these works opened a doorway into a different world, yet, if we listen carefully, all those worlds form a single great story, the story of how the English imagination grew from faith to freedom, from communal belief to individual voices, from obedience to curiosity, from divine order to human wonder. So today, let's walk through that story once more, not hurriedly, but slowly, reflectively. Let's look not just at how literature changed, but at how the human mind itself began to think, to question, to dream in a new way. This lecture is an invitation to look back, yes, but also to look within. Before we dive into the detailed discussion, let us first look at the learning objectives of today's session. By the end of this lecture, you'll be able to trace the evolution of English literary imagination from the late medieval to the early modern period, that is from 14th to 17th century. You'll be able to identify thematic and stylistic continuities linking Chaucer, Sidney, Spenser, Marlowe, and Shakespeare. You'll also be able to analyze how these changing ideas of faith, individuality, and morality are reflected in poetry and drama of the time. You'll be able to understand how literature transitions from collective moral instruction to personal psychological exploration. Appreciate the enduring human concerns, love, ambition, desire, conscience, all that connect these canonical texts. So, let us now start step-by-step discussions. To begin, let's recall the world from which Chaucer emerged, a world deeply shaped by religion, hierarchy, and collective identity. In the Middle Ages, life and art were grounded in faith. Literature served as moral instruction, not personal confession. Poetry was prayer, drama was devotion. Every man taught that only good deeds follow the soul beyond death. We have Piers the Plowman. It turned salvation into a dream quest. The writer basically served the purpose of a moral guide in this time and not a guide to self. But then everything changes. Comes Geoffrey Chaucer, a courtier, a diplomat, but above everything else, an observer, a listener to the voices. In the Canterbury Tales, he does something revolutionary. he lets ordinary people speak. And you've heard it in detail, the voice of ordinary people. Now, no longer the characters remain symbols of abstract virtues or vices. They are living, arguing, laughing, dreaming individuals. And the bold, assertive wife of Bath embodies this breakthrough in entirety. She opens her prologue with a line that still echoes with intellectual rebellion. Experience the unknown authority wherein this world is right enough for me. It is a declaration of independence, the assertion that truth can arise not from books or sermons but from life itself. The wife of Bath does not reject the church. She wrestles with it, using its language to claim her own. She is witty, earthy, sometimes contradictory, but entirely alive. Through her, Chaucer transforms the medieval moral tale into human drama. The pilgrimage is no longer just to Canterbury. It is a pilgrimage towards self-knowledge. This is the first great turn of English literature from moral allegory to moral psychology. Faith remains, but it begins to share this space with irony, curiosity, and laughter, the marks of a growing individual consciousness. Then comes Renaissance, and with it comes awakening. Humanism and discovery of self, they become key markers of change. This is 16th century, and by the 16th century, that spark of individuality, it becomes a glowing flame. When Renaissance arrived with its rediscovery of classical learning, its belief in human potential, its new curiosity about art, science, and love, it changes everything. Humanism teaches that man is not merely a sinner, but a thinker, a creator, capable of shaping his own destiny. This shift in worldview transforms poetry itself. And then we meet Sir Philip Sidney. Sidney's Astrophel and Stella opens with a tender confession. He says, "Loving in truth and fain in verse my love to show, that she, dear she, might take some pleasure of my pain." Here, poetry becomes self-expression, the mind speaking to itself. The poet struggles to be both truthful and artful, to let feeling and form coexist. Sidney's conflict between sincerity and style is the very essence of Renaissance humanism. It reveals a world where the heart and intellect negotiate their places. Love is no longer an abstract virtue. It becomes personal, psychological, inward. Then we meet Spencer, and with Spencer we get to reflect upon moral beauty of love. Edmund Spencer carries this vision forward, blending Platonic idealism with lyrical devotion. His sonnet, "One day I wrote her name upon the strand," it turns a fleeting act, writing a beloved's name in sand, into a profound meditation on art and immortality. One day I wrote her name upon the strand, but came the waves and washed it away. Here, love becomes an act of creation against time. To love truly is to preserve meaning. To write is to resist oblivion. In Sweet Warrior, Spenser's beloved, as we saw, is both muse and challenger, a force that tempers passion into virtue. His poetry transforms desire into discipline, showing how art refines emotion and grants moral clarity. Through Sidney and Spenser, the English lyric reaches a balance between passion and reason, devotion and self-awareness. The poet becomes both lover and philosopher, a mirror of the Renaissance soul. Next, we witness theatrical revolution when the soul took the stage. And then suddenly literature begins to move, to walk, to speak, to act. The Elizabethan theatre is born in the bustling world of London theatre. Theatre becomes the new church of imagination. It unites all classes in a single space of reflection and wonder. The stage becomes a mirror where England sees itself thinking aloud. Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, the tragedy of knowledge. Basically, Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus stands at the center of this revolution. Faustus is the scholar who longs for limitless power. What does he say? A sound magician is a mighty god. He represents the Renaissance thirst for knowledge, the human will to go beyond limits. Yet, in doing so, he also dramatizes its peril. Faustus's tragedy is not only about damnation, it is also about disillusionment. He gains all knowledge but loses meaning. When he cries out in despair, my God, look not so fierce on me," we see the modern self in it, brilliant, ambitious, but spiritually adrift. Through him, Marlowe turns the moral allegory of sin into a psychological portrait of temptation. The battle between good and the evil becomes an inner dialogue between doubt and desire. From Marlowe, we move to Shakespeare. We have read Shakespeare's Macbeth and we have witnessed what can be called the theatre of conscience. Shakespeare takes this inner struggle of the Renaissance mind further. In Macbeth, we witness ambition devouring itself. The witches do not command, they awaken Macbeth's own imagination. His downfall begins not with action, but with thought, idea. Once the seed of desire is planted, conscience becomes torment. His tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, the soliloquy reveals not just despair, but metaphysical exhaustion. Time has lost meaning. Existence has become mechanical repetition. Shakespeare thus transforms tragedy into introspection. The moral lesson comes not from divine punishment, but from psychological unraveling. In Macbeth, we no longer see the medieval sinner or even the Renaissance hero. We see the modern man being trapped between what they desire and what they know. And then Shakespeare's Twelfth Night comes into picture, where we find comedy as revelation. Shakespeare was never content with darkness, and therefore his Twelfth Night gives us the other face of humanity: love, laughter, and gentle confusion of identity. Viola's disguises as Cesario blurs boundaries between gender and emotion speak volumes about it. Through pretending, she discovers truth. Through comedy, Shakespeare teaches compassion. Even Feste, the fool, he speaks and gives final wisdom. Life is brief, love is uncertain, but joy is still possible. The moral drama that began in the church now ends in the theatre, not as a sermon but as a celebration. After the golden age of Queen Elizabeth, the world changes again. The theatres close under the Puritans. The stage is silenced. The playhouses darken. But the imagination does not die. It retreats inward. The conflicts that once filled the stage now unfold in private reflection. As is evident from John Donne's sonnets, Milton's Paradise Lost also is similar. All of them can be seen as spiritual dialogues or monologues. Donne writes, "Reason, your viceroy in me should defend, but is captived and proves weak or untrue." It is the same struggle as Faustus's, but spoken quietly to God instead of the devil. The battlefield is now the conscience. The Renaissance self, once loud and theatrical, becomes introspective and metaphysical. The journey that began in communal faith now ends in solitary prayer, but with far greater awareness of what it means to be human. So, what do these centuries from Chaucer to Shakespeare teach us? They teach that literature evolves not by abandoning the past but by transforming it. Chaucer gave us human voices within faith. Sidney gave us conscience within art. Spencer gave us virtue within passion. Marlowe gave us intellect within sin. Shakespeare gave us empathy within conflict. Together, they show that the true subject of literature is not heaven or politics, but the human condition itself. We began with communal salvation and ended with individual introspection. We moved from the pilgrim's road to the actor's stage, from allegory to psychology, from moral certainty to existential questioning. This is the making of the modern mind, one that questions, doubts, creates, and still seeks meaning. If we step back now, we can see the grand arc clearly. In the Middle Ages, art sought to save the soul. In the Renaissance, it sought to understand the soul. In Shakespeare, it learned to forgive the soul. That is the journey from the chapel to the stage, from divine order to human complexity. And it is a journey still continuing. Every time we read a poem that turns pain into beauty, or a play that turns chaos into order, we are participating in that same act of redemption through imagination. With this, we come to an end of our discussions. Let us quickly recapitulate key points from our discussion. We understood how the journey through British poetry and drama 14th to 17th century is a journey from faith to experience. Chaucer's Wife of Bath marks a defining shift in English literature, the first bold assertion of lived experience over written authority. And with it begins the birth of individuality within the moral universe of faith, where personal voice and moral reflection meet for the first time. We saw the humanist ideal with Sidney and Spencer. We stepped into the radiant world of Renaissance humanism, a vision that celebrates harmony between intellect and emotion, art and truth, morality and piety. Their poetry reminds us that reason and passion are not enemies but companions, together forming the balanced music of the human soul. We saw the rise of what could be understood as psychological drama. Marlowe's Dr. Faustus transforms the medieval morality play into a modern drama of the divided self, where ambition contends with conscience and the thirst for knowledge wrestles with the limits of faith. The stage ceases to be a pulpit, it becomes a mirror, reflecting the restless, questioning modern mind. Shakespeare's imagination is universal. In Macbeth and Twelfth Night, Shakespeare opens before us the full theatre of human feeling, from guilt and horror to laughter and forgiveness. By uniting tragedy and comedy, Shakespeare shows that to understand humanity is to accept its contradictions, the shadow and the light within us all. This can be understood as the inward turn, and it manifests itself beautifully in the 17th century with great poets like John Donne and Milton. And with it, the great moral drama, it starts moving inward. The struggle between sin and salvation becomes an inner pilgrimage fought in the silence of the soul. We saw how the theatre of the world turns into the theatre of mind, with it intense, meditative and profoundly personal. What is the lesson that we draw from this course? Across all these writers runs one unbroken thread of human experience. The idea that human experience is worthy of art. And with this, faith transforms into imagination, and through imagination, humanity learns to know itself. As we close this course, remember, the writers you have studied are not relics. They are ancestors of our thoughts, our doubts, our voices, our fears, our struggles. When Chaucer's wife laughs, when Sidney sighs, when Spencer rides against time, when Faustus dares, when Macbeth broods, and when Viola smiles. Each of them performs the same act of courage, turning experience into meaning. They teach us that art is not an escape from reality, but its deepest interpretation. And that perhaps is the greatest truth early English poetry and drama leave with us, that imagination is humanity's way of surviving its own contradictions. So, as you carry these voices forward, remember the chapel and the stage are not opposites, they are two sides of the same soul. Faith becomes thought, thought becomes art, and art endlessly becomes us. Remember too that literature is never just about the past, it's about our own unfinished story. Chaucer's pilgrims, Sidney's lovers, Spencer's seekers, Marlowe's dreamers, and Shakespeare's questioners, they all live on in us. Every time you doubt, desire, aspire, or choose, you continue their conversation. The study of literature is not the study of dead texts, it is the study of what makes us truly alive. So, as you move forward, don't read only to know, read to understand and to listen, to discover what your own voice sounds like amid the voices of centuries. Thank you for walking this path with such attention and curiosity. I hope you carry with you some of today's echoes of laughter, longing, and thought into whatever you read next and into the kind of human being you continue to become. And perhaps the real question as we leave is not what did these writers say, but what are they still asking us? Thank you. And keep reading with your mind awake and your heart engaged.